You want to play the piano? The principal scoffed, his voice laced with disbelief. This isn't a charity talent show. Lily Monroe stood frozen on stage, a foster girl in hand-me-down shoes, humiliated in front of the entire school. But what no one knew was that she had been playing piano in secret for years, teaching herself in the shadows of a broken home. What followed was a breathtaking journey of resilience, betrayal, and triumph, as one forgotten girl found the courage to silence her critics with nothing but music. And when she finally played, the entire school stood still. Now, before we dive deeper, please like and subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know what time and where you're watching from. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the story. You want to what? Principal Hargrove's voice cracked across the auditorium like a whip. The room, filled with rows of students clutching audition sheets, fell into a hush. Lily Monroe stood frozen beneath the flickering stage lights, clutching a wrinkled form in both hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but because she knew what was coming next. I asked, she said, her voice barely rising above the silence, to audition for the winter showcase. I want to play piano. Hargrove's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like a smirk that had grown accustomed to cruelty. You want to play piano? He echoed mockingly, letting the words roll off his tongue like a bad joke. Miss Monroe, this isn't some open mic night at a shelter. This is a performance for real talent, for students who've actually studied music, who've trained. Lily's face flushed hot. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, some pitying, some amused, but most just indifferent. No one dared speak. The principal's gaze traveled deliberately down to her shoes, faded canvas sneakers with worn soles, then back up, lingering with disdain. Perhaps you'd like to return when you've had more structure in your life. A few chuckles fluttered from the back of the room. Lily didn't move. She couldn't. The form in her hands, once a fragile symbol of hope, now felt like ash. That morning, she had stood in front of the mirror in her foster home's narrow hallway, combing her hair into a neat braid and whispering, "You can do this. Just be brave today." But standing there now, humiliated in front of 100 strangers, her heart was twisting into something else, something colder, sharper. "I've practiced," she murmured, voice cracking. "I'm good." Principal Hargrove let out a scoffing laugh. "Everyone thinks they're good, Miss Monroe. That's what makes mediocrity so popular." He turned his back and clapped his hands to signal the end of the conversation. Next, her feet stayed planted. She didn't know why. She had learned by now that silence and invisibility were her best shields. That being seen came at a price. But something deep inside her whispered, "If you walk away now, you'll never forgive yourself." Still clutching the form, she turned slowly and walked back down the steps of the stage. Each step echoed hollowly in the auditorium, like little betrayals. She didn't cry, not yet. Not until the side door swung shut behind her and the cold hallway swallowed her whole. Outside, rain painted the windows in gray streaks. She pressed her back against the wall, staring up at the ceiling tiles as if answers could be found there. She hated crying. It always made her feel weak, like the child she'd fought so hard to outgrow. "Miss Monroe?" a voice said gently. Lily's eyes snapped toward the sound. A woman, Miss Dorset, the choir teacher, stood at the end of the hall, holding a clipboard, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," Lily said quickly, drying her eyes with her sleeve. "I didn't mean to make a scene. I shouldn't have." "You were brave," Miss Dorset interrupted quietly. "Braver than most." Lily didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called her brave before. Trouble, maybe. Quiet, rebellious, but not brave. The woman stepped closer, her heels clicking softly. "Do you have experience?" I've never taken lessons, but there's an old piano at my foster home. I just play." Miss Dorset nodded slowly. "Come by the music room tomorrow morning, early, before school starts." "Why?" Lily asked, her voice small. The woman's smile was faint, but there. "Because I'd like to hear what your heart sounds like." That night, Lily lay awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her foster bedroom. She could hear the television blaring from downstairs, the growling voice of her foster father arguing with someone on the phone. Her room smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten dreams. But in her mind, she wasn't there. She was at the piano. It was cracked and out of tune. One of the black keys stuck sometimes, and the left pedal didn't work, but it was hers, if only in the stillness of night. She taught herself Chopin by playing the same passage over and over, letting her fingers feel what they didn't yet understand. She once played a lullaby she only vaguely remembered from the days before foster care, its melody coming in waves, incomplete, like a memory you chase in a dream. But when she played it, her hands stopped shaking. At 5:47 the next morning, Lily was standing outside the school doors in the drizzle, a frayed backpack slung over her shoulder, the sleeves of her too big jacket pulled over her fingers. She was about to turn around and leave when the janitor unlocked the side door and let her in. "Practice early, huh?" he said, raising an eyebrow. Lily nodded quickly, hoping he wouldn't ask more questions. But instead, he smiled. Music's best when the world's still quiet. She found the music room empty, rows of chairs waiting like silent witnesses. At the front, a battered upright piano sat waiting, its lid already open. Miss Dorset arrived minutes later, pulling off her scarf, brushing rain from her coat. "Whenever you're ready," she said. Lily hesitated. Her hands were cold. Her heart was loud. She sat. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and then she began. The notes were soft at first, hesitant like whispered confessions. But then the melody unfolded like a page being turned, each chord carrying weight, memory, longing. She wasn't reading sheet music. She was reading her soul. Miss Dorset didn't speak. She didn't move. When the final note faded, she stood quietly, walked to the window and blinked hard several times. "I don't know where that came from," Lily said, afraid to look up. "It came from you," Miss Dorset said softly. "And if Principal Hargrove can't see that, then we'll find someone who will." Lily looked up, and for the first time in a long time, someone was actually looking back. Not past her, not through her, at her. That moment didn't erase the ache of yesterday. It didn't undo the shame or the whispered laughter in the auditorium, but it was something else. A crack of sunlight in a winter sky. She could work with that. She had to. The hallway smelled of floor wax and damp textbooks, the kind of scent that clung to old memories and rarely left. Lily moved quietly through the empty corridors the next morning, her footsteps soft, careful not to wake whatever piece might still be sleeping in the early light. She'd played again for Miss Dorset, and this time with more confidence. A small jazz variation she'd stitched together on her own, something she never dared play for anyone before. When she finished, Miss Dorset gave her a look Lily didn't fully understand. Part awe, part sadness, as if hearing her music made her remember something she'd long tried to forget. But today wasn't about music. Today was about survival. Principal Hargrove had made it painfully clear that any continued attempt to audition would be met with consequences. And Lily already knew what that meant. She knew the shape of silence, how adults could starve a child's world with bureaucracy. One misplaced file, one late grade, one disapproving nod, and the door closed forever. She thought about quitting, letting it all go. It was easier that way. But then there was that moment, that flicker of warmth in Miss Dorset's eyes. That feeling she had when the last note hung in the air, unjudged and still glowing. She wasn't ready to let that go. Not yet. She turned the corner and nearly bumped into a large rolling trash bin, pushed by the janitor. "Mr. Alvarez." "Ah," he said, drawing back with a quick grin. "Almost ran you over, pequeña pianista." "Little pianist." Lily blinked. "Do you remember me?" "Hard to forget someone who looks at a piano like it's sacred ground," he said, chuckling softly. "Besides, I heard something the other day. Someone playing beautifully. Thought it might be the wind at first." Lily looked down, cheeks warm. "That was probably just me, practicing." He tilted his head, watching her closely. "You play from the heart. Most students, they only play from the fingers." There was something in his tone, not flattery, but recognition. Like he saw a secret she was still learning to understand. "I used to teach," he said, almost as an afterthought. "Before I came here, music theory, composition, back home in Veracruz." "You taught music?" she asked, stunned. He nodded, eyes distant. "Until politics got louder than pianos, and then I came here. Cleaner job, quieter life." He smiled again, and it reached the corners of his face. "Do you practice every morning?" "Only when I can sneak in," she admitted. "You should practice more," he said gently. "The music inside you, it's trying to breathe." For a moment she didn't know what to say. People didn't speak to her like this. Not with reverence. Not like she mattered. "I can't get into the winter showcase," she whispered. "Principal Hargrove said no, and someone already broke the piano I was using." Mr. Alvarez's eyes darkened. "He said no because he's afraid. People like him." He gestured with a gloved hand. "They build little fences around power and call it tradition." Lily didn't respond, but she felt something shift in her chest. A quiet recognition that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story. He paused, as if weighing something in his mind. "I want to show you something," he said. She followed him past the double doors of the auditorium, around the backstage curtain, through a forgotten hallway that smelled like varnish and time. At the far end was a locked door, which he opened with a long silver key that hung on a lanyard tucked beneath his uniform. Inside was dust and silence. And then, there it was, a baby grand piano. Its wood was dulled by age, the ivory keys slightly yellowed, but it stood tall and proud, like a ship waiting for wind. A beam of early morning sunlight spilled through a high window, striking the polished lid with a soft glow. Lily stepped toward it slowly, like she might wake something ancient. "I found it here when I started this job," Mr. Alvarez said quietly. "No one plays it. They think it's broken. It's not." "Why don't they use it for the music program?" He shrugged. "Because they forgot it's here." Lily sat gently, brushing the dust from the keys. She pressed one down. The note rang out, slightly out of tune, but warm, alive. Her fingers moved to another key, then another. She played a chord, then a soft progression. And suddenly, like a candle catching fire, a melody unfurled, one she hadn't planned, but somehow already knew. The room filled with it. Mr. Alvarez stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes glistening. When she finished, neither of them spoke. The quiet said everything. He stepped forward, lifting the lid. The hammers need adjusting, and the A3 key sticks sometimes, but it can be fixed. Lily looked up. "Would you help me?" He met her gaze. "I thought you'd never ask." That afternoon, when the halls were empty and the sky began to bruise with the first signs of dusk, they returned to the hidden room. With tools he brought from home, a small screwdriver, fine grit sandpaper, a soft brush, they worked side by side. He showed her how to clean beneath the keys, how to realign the strings, how to listen for the difference between a dull note and a tired one. She listened like a student. He spoke like a man remembering who he used to be. "You know," he said, tightening a screw, "when I was young, I believed music could change people." She didn't laugh, didn't scoff. She simply said, "Maybe it still can." They kept meeting, every morning before school, and sometimes even after. Each day, the piano came more to life, and so did Lily. Her fingers grew confident, her posture stronger, and something else, something deeper, began to take root inside her. Hope. One morning, after she'd played a particularly stirring arrangement of Clair de Lune, Mr. Alvarez clapped slowly, smiling. "That piece has lived 100 lives, but I think you just gave it one more." I want to play it for the showcase," she said, hesitating. "I mean, if I still can." His smile faded into something more serious. "You can," he said, "but not for Hargrove, not for the school, not for the applause." She looked at him. "You play for you, Lily," he said. "You play because it's the only voice you've got, and it deserves to be heard." That night, Lily opened an old shoebox beneath her bed. Inside was a photo of a woman with kind eyes, her mother, taken before everything fell apart. The photo was bent at the edges, faded from time, but her mother's expression never changed. She held the picture to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I think you'd like the way I play now." She imagined her mother's voice, soft and sweet, saying, "You were always music, baby girl," even before the world heard it. The next day she arrived at school early, slipping through the side entrance like usual. But this time something felt different, something sharp. When she reached the practice room, she froze. The baby grand was in pieces, the strings cut, the lid cracked. A cruel red marker scrawled across the keys, "Not your stage." Lily didn't scream, she didn't cry. She sat beside it, fingers hovering over broken silence, and whispered, "I won't stop." The room smelled of sawdust and sadness. The fractured baby grand sat like a wounded animal in the middle of the small practice space, its strings curling like snapped nerves, keys blackened with permanent ink, wounded beyond use. The words written across them, "Not your stage," cut deeper than any blade. They didn't just insult her talent. They tried to erase her place in the world. Lily didn't move at first. Her body ached with stillness. Her breath trembled in and out of her lungs in shallow sips. She felt the burn rising in her throat, but refused to let it fall from her eyes. Not yet. Behind her, the door creaked open. "Oh Dios mío." Mr. Alvarez's voice was barely a whisper. He stepped in, his eyes wide, his shoulders stiff with quiet fury. Lily stood slowly, brushing dust from her skirt like she was shedding grief. "They wanted me to stop." Mr. Alvarez crouched beside the piano and ran his fingers across the broken lid. He didn't speak for a long moment. "It wasn't just vandalism," he finally said. "It was a message, but sometimes—" He looked up, eyes meeting hers. "Sometimes messages only mean something if you listen to them." "I don't want to listen to them." "Then don't," he said gently. "Let them scream into silence. And you play louder." She tried to smile. It didn't quite reach her lips. "I don't have anywhere to play now." He studied her face for a beat longer, then stood. "That's not entirely true." "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then motioned for her to follow. They slipped quietly out of the room, past classrooms filled with early morning murmurs, past students huddled near lockers discussing forgotten homework and weekend plans. None of them noticed the girl walking silently down the hallway with the janitor who used to teach music in another life. They made their way to the staff wing. At the end of the corridor stood a door Lily had never been through. It read, "Faculty Resource Room, authorized personnel only." Mr. Alvarez unlocked it with a small key he kept separate from the rest. The room was plain, linoleum floors, metal chairs stacked in the corner, an old coffee machine in the back. But in the far corner, behind a thick velvet curtain that had once belonged to the drama department, sat a modest upright piano. It was smaller, older, but intact. "Maintenance storage forgot it was here," he said. "But I didn't." Lily approached it cautiously, ran her fingers along the top. The wood was worn smooth from years of playing. It smelled like chalk and time. A small gold plate above the keys read, "Donated in honor of Mrs. Miriam Lore, 1965. She sat without asking. The first key she pressed sang with a slightly sour hum, but it was whole, real, waiting. She closed her eyes and played, not perfectly, not boldly, but with heart. The melody she chose was her own, a quiet, hesitant lullaby that morphed and evolved with every note. Each measure carried something, a memory of her mother's voice, the rustle of plastic trash bags during a midnight move, the creak of a foster home's stairwell. All the things that had no words but music understood. Mr. Alvarez didn't speak. He didn't need to. When she finished, her fingers lingered on the last chord like a goodbye she didn't want to say. Then he nodded. "I have an idea," he said. That afternoon, while most students poured into the gym for basketball tryouts and cheer rehearsals, Mr. Alvarez made a call, and another. And then one more. His voice, usually gentle and unassuming, took on the quiet strength of someone who had once stood on concert stages and directed symphonies beneath gold chandeliers. The next morning, Lily arrived at the staff room expecting only another practice session. Instead, she found 3 strangers sitting on folding chairs in the back of the room. 2 women and a man, all dressed with casual sophistication, their eyes curious and watchful. She froze in the doorway. "Who are they?" Mr. Alvarez stepped beside her, smile warm. "They're music professors from the community college and the local conservatory, friends of mine. I told them about you." Lily's heart skipped. I'm not ready." "You're never ready," he said softly. "That's what makes it honest." She looked down at her hands. They were trembling again. "What if I fail?" "Then fail beautifully," he said, "but don't stay silent." She nodded once and walked to the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she breathed, just once, and let go. She started with Chopin, an etude she had learned by heart in secret, while her foster siblings played video games downstairs and she played shadows upstairs. Then she shifted seamlessly into a piece of her own, something aching and bold and full of defiance. A declaration, not a plea. The room was silent when she finished, the kind of silence that mattered, that meant something. Then the man, gray beard, soft eyes, spoke first. "You taught yourself?" She nodded. "Just playing what I hear." One of the women blinked away tears. "You're not a student, you're an artist." The other professor cleared her throat, clearly moved. "We'd like to recommend her for a mentorship slot, one-on-one study." I'll talk to the board. She has something that can't be taught. Mr. Alvarez beamed. Lily sat still, stunned, as if her ears didn't believe what they had heard. But I didn't even audition, she whispered. Oh, sweetheart, the woman said with a soft smile. You just did. That night, Lily didn't sleep, not because of fear, because of possibility. For the first time in her life, the idea of a future wasn't some distant, blurry thing held by other people. It was real, tactile, earned. The next day, word traveled, quietly at first. Whispers in the staff lounge, raised eyebrows in the music hallway. Someone had played for outside judges, someone had defied Hargrove, someone was getting noticed. Principal Hargrove summoned her that afternoon. His office was colder than usual, the blinds drawn. I understand you've been organizing unauthorized performances, he said, steepling his fingers, using staff rooms, engaging with outsiders. I was invited, Lily said calmly. They came to hear me play. His jaw clenched. You're a student here. You operate under my authority. I didn't break any rules. You undermined school protocol. She didn't flinch, or expose the bias in it. There was a long silence between them. The kind that doesn't ask for words but dares them anyway. Then he leaned forward. I'll make you a deal. You may perform in the winter showcase, but you'll play last. And know this, if your performance fails to meet expectations, I will revoke any privileges extended to you, including your enrollment status. Lily stared back at him, her voice quiet but unwavering. I'm not playing for your approval. He chuckled, humorless. Of course not. You're playing for survival. She stood. No, I'm playing for truth. As she walked out, the weight that had lived on her shoulders for so long began to lift. Not all the way. Not yet. But she felt it. The promise of something greater. A girl. A piano. A stage. And the story that would come from playing what no one expected her to. The night of the winter showcase arrived dressed in frost and expectation. Cars lined the streets outside the school, headlights glowing like low stars in the chilled dusk. Parents in coats and scarves hurried through the glass doors, murmuring greetings, clutching printed programs and lukewarm coffee. Inside the auditorium, lights warmed the air, and a quiet hush danced over the velvet seats as if the building itself knew something momentous was about to unfold. Backstage, Lily sat alone on a folding chair near the curtain, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her dress was plain, soft blue cotton with a stitched hem that her foster mother, to her surprise, had offered to fix that morning without asking why. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like armor. Her heart pounded steadily, not with fear, but with clarity. One by one, the performers took their turns. Violin solos, a dramatic monologue from a Shakespearean scene, an elaborate ballet routine performed by Principal Hargrove's hand-picked golden girl, Ava Reynolds, who curtsied like a queen born of silk and spotlight. Applause rang out for each, safe and polite. The audience was warm, but not moved. Lily remained still. Mr. Alvarez had found her earlier, before the doors opened, and placed his hands on her shoulders. You don't owe them anything, he said. Not their approval, not their applause. You owe only the music, and yourself. She nodded slowly. What if they hate it? He smiled, and there was something almost fatherly in it. Then they'll hear it anyway. At the front of the auditorium, Principal Hargrove took the microphone. His tone was polished, as always, coated with charm like varnish hiding old wood. And now, he said, pausing with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, we close tonight with a surprise entry. Please welcome Lily Monroe. There was a rustle of whispers, a few surprised gasps, some scattered clapping, uncertain and curious. Backstage, Lily stood. Her feet moved before her mind could protest. Each step toward the piano felt like walking into the wind, but she didn't slow down. Not when she saw the lights. Not when she saw the rows of faces, some familiar, most strangers. Not when she caught Principal Hargrove's icy gaze from the corner of the stage. She sat. The grand piano gleamed under the soft lights, polished and waiting. Her hands hovered over the keys as the room fell into silence, tense, loaded, expectant. She closed her eyes. She began with something delicate, a melody born of memory, soft and searching, like morning light over forgotten hills. It was not a song they would recognize. It wasn't classical. It wasn't famous. It was hers. She played it as if each note had been kept inside her for years, only now finding breath. Her hands moved with elegance, shaped by 1,000 stolen hours, guided by instinct and pain and wonder. Then she shifted. Without warning, The melody deepened, drawing from Chopin, echoing Debussy, weaving sorrow into beauty with breathtaking ease. The keys became an extension of her voice, a language she'd never been allowed to speak in words. She told them about growing up in silence, about moving from house to house, about the cracked piano in the basement, about the broken strings and the boy who laughed when he heard she wanted to audition, about Hargrove's sneer. She told them everything, without ever opening her mouth. The room was still, not a cough, not a shuffle, not a whisper. Then came the final passage. Lily leaned into the crescendo, her body rising with the music, her fingers flying in a furious ballet of sound and soul. And then, abruptly, she slowed. A single note held longer than the rest, soft, lingering, like the final breath of something that had waited too long to be heard. She let it echo into the silence, and let her hands fall gently into her lap. There was no applause at first, just stunned stillness. Then, somewhere in the dark, someone stood. It was Miss Dorset. She clapped once, then again, and the room erupted. A wave of sound rolled toward the stage, thunderous, unrestrained, real. Applause that wasn't polite or routine. Applause that came from something deeper. Some stood, then many, until the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation. Lily blinked hard but didn't move. She didn't bow, she didn't wave. She just sat there, holding still the girl she'd always been and letting the music wrap around her one last time, like a coat she never thought she'd be allowed to wear. Behind the curtain, Principal Hargrove didn't clap. He folded his arms, lips pressed into a hard line, like a man who just watched a tower he built fall down quietly in front of him. When she finally stood and walked off stage, Mr. Alvarez was there waiting. His eyes were wet. She looked at him, and for once, she didn't speak. She simply walked into his arms and let herself be held. Back in the auditorium, the applause was still fading, but something else had begun. Something that couldn't be clapped into silence. A shift, a change, a reckoning. Lily hadn't just played a song, she had rewritten the story they thought they knew. The applause still echoed in Lily's ears the next morning. But the world outside hadn't changed overnight. The sun still rose behind streaked windows. The cafeteria still served lukewarm oatmeal. Students still hurried through the halls, half awake and whispering. And yet, something was different, something intangible. The air around her had weight now, but not the kind that crushed. It was a weight that came with being seen. She kept her head low as always, navigating the crowds, but now the glances were different, not dismissive, not pitying, curious, respectful. A boy from her chemistry class, one who'd never spoken to her before, murmured, "That was amazing," as he passed by. Another girl slipped a folded note into her hand at her locker. All it said was, "You made me cry in the best way. Thank you." Lily folded it carefully and tucked it into the front pocket of her notebook like a secret. By third period, the buzz had reached a low hum. Teachers were still whispering about the performance in the staff lounge. The school counselor emailed her to set up a meeting, just to talk. Even Miss Dorset pulled her aside between classes and said the music department had received 2 calls from local programs requesting more information about the gifted pianist. It didn't feel real. But then again, neither had the applause. By lunch, word came that Principal Hargrove had postponed his usual post-showcase email summary. He hadn't even posted on the school's website. That alone sent murmurs through the student body. For someone who prided himself on control, his silence was deafening. Lily sat alone in the courtyard, unbothered by the chill in the air. She wasn't hungry. Her fingers tapped unconsciously on her knee, mimicking the melody she'd played the night before. Each note came back to her like an old friend. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her until someone spoke. "That wasn't supposed to happen, you know?" She turned. Ava Reynolds, dancer, darling of the school, Hargrove's pride, stood just behind her, arms crossed, face unreadable. Lily stared at her for a moment, then looked back toward the field. "What wasn't?" "You weren't supposed to steal the show." Lily's heart beat once, loud and hard. "I didn't steal anything," she said quietly. Ava sat on the bench opposite her, crossing her legs like she was still on stage. "You're not trained. You don't take lessons. You didn't even audition through the proper process. But now everyone's talking about you like you're some kind of genius." "I didn't ask for that." "No, you just earned it," Ava snapped. Then she paused. "Which makes it worse, honestly." Lily blinked. Because now I can't even be mad at you. That music? Ava shook her head. It made me feel things I didn't want to feel. You didn't perform. You spoke. And I hate that it was better than anything I've ever done. For a moment, Lily didn't know how to respond. Then she said softly, I think that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Ava let out a short, humorless laugh. Don't let it go to your head. But before she walked away, she added under her breath, He's not happy. Who? Lily asked. Ava didn't answer. She just walked off, her posture tight, her shadow long behind her. Later that day, Lily was summoned to the principal's office. She expected coldness, but what she walked into was worse. Calm. The kind of calm that came after a storm had been quietly swept under the rug, leaving the debris out of sight but never truly gone. Principal Hargrove didn't look up right away. He was typing. When he finally glanced at her, his eyes didn't carry the mockery she was used to. They held calculation. Miss Monroe, he began, it seems your performance has attracted attention. She said nothing. Local press has reached out. Apparently, one of the professors who attended your little exhibition mentioned you in a community newsletter. Still, she remained silent. He leaned back in his chair. The school board has taken notice, and naturally I must maintain the reputation of this institution. Are you going to punish me? She asked, voice steady. He smiled thinly. Punish you? No. I'm going to reframe you. Your narrative, I mean. Lily's brow furrowed. You'll be featured in next week's bulletin. Local foster youth triumphs in the arts. He said it with just enough disdain that the words felt like an insult. You want to use me. I want to protect this school's image, and frankly, your little Cinderella moment, while unorthodox, does make for good PR. She stood, hands clenched at her sides. I didn't play to make you look good. Well, lucky for us both, he replied coolly. You did. When she turned to leave, he added almost lazily, I'd advise against stirring up any more drama. You've already played your hand, Miss Monroe. Don't push your luck. Outside his office, the hallway felt too bright, too clean, like a hospital trying too hard to look like hope. She didn't cry. She walked straight to the janitor's closet. Mr. Alvarez was mopping the tiled floor, headphones around his neck. When he saw her face, he set everything down. He's trying to own it, she said, voice sharp with betrayal. He nodded, unsurprised. People like that, they only see value when it shines through their own window. What do I do? He took a breath. You keep playing, you keep telling your story, and if they try to use it, you speak louder. Make sure they hear your version, not his. She looked at him. But how? He tilted his head. Remember what you told me, that you played for truth? She nodded. Then let truth become your shield. Not everyone has to fight with fists. She returned to her classes that afternoon, mind swirling. That evening, she found another note in her locker. You made me want to be brave again. My sister is in foster care. I never visit her. But after hearing you play, I think I will. There were no names, just the words. That night, she practiced in silence. No audience, no teachers, no clapping. Just the music, it was enough. And as the days passed, offers began to come. A regional competition reached out, then a scholarship committee, then a summer program with conservatory staff who had heard the performance secondhand and wanted to see it for themselves. One offer in particular stood out. A full-ride scholarship to the state's most prestigious pre-college music academy. Lily sat with the letter in her lap, reading the lines over and over. They weren't just offering her lessons, they were offering her home. She looked up from the letter and realized something had shifted again, not just in how the school saw her, but in how she saw herself. Not as a foster kid, not as a fluke, but as someone who had taken the stage meant for someone else and made it hers. The letter felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't even thick, just a single sheet tucked into a plain white envelope with her name typed neatly on the front. But Lily had read it so many times, the creases had become soft and worn. Each word printed inside held more than an opportunity. It held a promise, a full scholarship, a place at the academy, a piano that doesn't wobble, a dorm room that isn't borrowed, a future that feels like it's finally hers. The news spread faster than she expected. Within 2 days, the local paper had picked it up. Foster girl's piano performance wins prestigious scholarship. And by the end of the week, a local TV crew had called the school asking to interview the student who made a whole town cry. Lily hadn't even agreed to anything yet, but the world seemed to be answering for her. When she walked through the front doors that Monday morning, the shift was undeniable. Students didn't just look at her. They saw her, not with curiosity anymore, but with a strange kind of reverence. As though something untouchable had descended over the ordinary girl who used to eat lunch alone by the vending machines. Someone had even pinned a photocopy of the newspaper story to the bulletin board in the main hallway. There she was, captured mid-performance, eyes closed, face soft with concentration, hands caught in the air above the piano keys like wings before flight. For the first time, she didn't shrink when she saw her own name printed in bold. But Principal Hargrove was nowhere to be seen. She passed his office twice that day. The blinds were drawn tight. The gold plaque that usually gleamed on his door looked strangely dim in the weak morning light. There were whispers. He'd refused the media request, told the secretary to redirect any calls. Someone said he was reviewing district policy. Another student joked that he'd gone into hiding. Lily didn't care about the rumors. What mattered was what came next. It was Miss Dorset who found her during 6th period, slipping quietly into her science class and whispering something to the teacher. A moment later, Lily was excused and led down the hallway with a look of concern, tightening the corners of her mentor's mouth. "There's someone I think you should meet," she said softly. Lily followed without a word. They stopped in front of the library conference room. Inside, seated at the long oak table, was a woman in a tailored navy suit and pearl earrings, poised, elegant, with sharp eyes and a kind smile. "This is Miss Elaine Carter," Miss Dorset said. "She's a representative from the State Arts Endowment. She asked for you specifically." Lily's breath caught. The woman stood. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Lily. You've stirred quite the conversation in the arts community." Lily shifted, unsure what to say. Miss Carter continued, "We're developing a feature for our winter journal, highlighting young artists overcoming odds to change their communities, and we'd like to make you our centerpiece." "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that," Lily murmured. "You are," Miss Carter said with gentle conviction. "You didn't just perform, you confronted the system that tried to silence you, and you did it with grace." Lily blinked, eyes prickling. It still felt strange, this version of her that people spoke of as if she were made of music and steel. "There's more," Miss Carter said, lowering her voice. "Our director has spoken with the state superintendent. They'd like to recognize you at the Winter Education Gala." "The what?" "It's televised, statewide, held in the Capitol, a gathering of lawmakers, educators, school leaders, and the best student performers of the year. You'd represent your district." Lily felt her knees soften beneath her. "Is that allowed?" she asked. "I mean, with my background?" "You were selected because of your background," Miss Carter said gently, "because you rose from it." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was sacred. Lily nodded. "Then I'll play." The next day, the local news station sent a camera crew to the school. Principal Hargrove, cornered by obligation, was forced to smile beside Lily in a tightly staged hallway interview. He stood stiff as stone, his voice overly sweet. "We are very proud of Miss Monroe," he said. "She exemplifies the kind of student we hope to nurture here. Determined, self-motivated, a true underdog success." Lily stood beside him, her hands folded, her smile polite but distant. They cut the camera after 5 minutes. The news crew packed up quickly, sensing the discomfort beneath the surface. As soon as the last camera left the building, Principal Hargrove turned sharply to Lily. "Don't think for a second that this makes you untouchable," he snapped, the mask dropping. "I don't need to be untouchable," she replied calmly. "I just need to be heard." His eyes narrowed. "You're playing a dangerous game, Monroe." "No," she said. "I'm playing the piano." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights, small in a hallway he used to rule. That afternoon, she returned to the hidden practice room where the old upright piano still waited, the one Mr. Alvarez had rescued from abandonment, the one that still bore the faint ghost of all the music they had breathed into it together. He was already there, cleaning the keys with a soft cloth. She sat beside him quietly. "They want me to play at the state gala," she said after a moment. He looked at her, smile slowly blooming across his face. "Of course they do. It's a lot. So is everything else you've lived through." She looked at the piano. What should I play? He didn't answer right away. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. A melody, handwritten in soft pencil, notes that flowed like water. I started this years ago, he said, back when I thought music had left me. I never finished it. I didn't know what the ending was supposed to sound like. She opened it, reading the measures. It was haunting and lovely and unfinished. I think, he said quietly, you might be the ending. Lily closed her eyes. She could already hear it. The letter from the state gala sat taped to the inside of Lily's bedroom closet, next to a faded photograph of her mother and a torn page from a thrifted music book. Each morning she saw it, its ivory seal pressed into thick paper, her name printed in gold beneath the words State Education Gala, honoring student excellence. Each time she looked at it, the same disbelief rippled through her. This was real. The next 3 weeks blurred with movement. Mornings at school were quiet but charged, students watching her, teachers smiling a little longer. Even those who once rolled their eyes when she passed now nodded, as if unsure how to apologize without words. But she didn't need their regret. She had something stronger. Her afternoons belonged to music. Mr. Alvarez met her in the practice room every day after final bell. The upright piano had been cleaned until it shined like old copper. He brought fresh sheet music, hand-annotated with gentle suggestions and long pauses where he'd whisper, "Let the note breathe here. Make space for silence. That's where truth lives." They began with the piece he had written, the unfinished melody scribbled in pencil like a half-written memory. It started simply. A minor key, slow and sorrowful, the kind that spoke of winter shadows and childhood's too quiet. But slowly, under Lily's hands, it grew. She added flourishes, bridges, echoes of pieces she remembered from long ago, the lullaby her mother used to hum when she thought no one was listening, a few bars from the first piece she ever dared to try in secret. And one final movement, soft, hesitant, and then soaring, that turned the once lonely melody into something defiant, something whole. Mr. Alvarez listened each day with his hand over his chest, and when she played it through, fully from beginning to end, for the first time, he didn't speak. He just stood, walked to the window, and wiped a tear from his cheek with the edge of his sleeve. "She would have been proud," he whispered. Lily looked up. "Who?" He turned slowly. "Your mother." She froze. "You told me once you remember her singing. That lullaby." He smiled faintly. "It's in your playing, Lily. She's there, every note." The breath caught in her throat. The kind of pain that wasn't hurting anymore, just aching gently, like something long buried rising to the surface for air. She nodded. "Then she'll come with me." The week of the gala arrived like a windstorm, fast, cold, and full of noise. Cameras followed her into school the day before. The local press was granted access to her last rehearsal, and though Lily had never wanted that kind of spotlight, she played anyway. Not for the articles, not for the applause, but because she owed it to the music. The night before her performance, she barely slept. Her suitcase sat by the door, modest, a little frayed at the corners, but filled with her best clothes and the shoes Miss Dorset had taken her to buy as a gift. A quiet thank you for a student who had changed her classroom by simply being brave enough to try. Her foster parents didn't say much, but they made her a sandwich to take on the road. It was wrapped in wax paper, tucked with a tiny note. "We'll be watching. Be proud of you, kid." That alone nearly made her cry. She and Mr. Alvarez traveled to the state capitol together. The school had refused to fund the trip, claiming it was outside of standard programming, so Miss Dorset and 3 other teachers pooled money to cover the cost. They handed it to Lily in a plain envelope during homeroom. No fuss, no fanfare, just love. The theater where the gala was held rose like a cathedral. White marble steps, gold trim on the awnings, pillars that caught the last light of the evening sun. Inside, rows of plush red velvet seats stretched toward the stage, where a grand piano gleamed under 1,000 lights. Lily stepped inside and felt the weight of it. Not fear. Responsibility. She stood in the wings as the show began. Speeches, scholarships, spotlights on students with science awards, engineering dreams, poetry recitations, all worthy, all brilliant, but none of them were her. And then, the announcer's voice echoed across the hall. "Now, a performance from a student whose story has captured the heart of this state. Please welcome Lily Monroe." The lights dimmed. She walked slowly to the piano, her dress brushing the polished floor, hands steady. The crowd didn't murmur or shift. They simply waited. She sat. The bench creaked under her, and then she played. The first note landed like a whisper in a cathedral, soft but certain. The melody rose from her hands like breath on cold glass. Fragile, beautiful. The room melted away. Time vanished. She wasn't on a stage anymore. She was back in the basement, fingers hovering over a broken keyboard. She was in the janitor's closet, listening to an old man hum forgotten songs. She was in her foster room, dreaming in silence. She was with her mother. The music told everything she couldn't. Every house she left. Every family that said goodbye. Every teacher who looked past her. Every time she was told she didn't belong. And then redemption. The final movement erupted with color, a defiant rush of sound that filled the air with light. When she played the last note, it rang longer than she expected, as if the piano itself wanted to speak. Silence. And then, a wave of applause that nearly knocked her breath out. Not polite, not scripted. Real. People stood. Some wept. Teachers, strangers, senators, even the orchestra conductor backstage had tears in his eyes. She stood slowly, bowed once, and walked off stage into the arms of Mr. Alvarez, who had waited quietly in the wings the whole time. "You didn't just play the piano," he whispered. "You broke the ceiling." She smiled, finally letting herself cry. Back in the theater, the announcer took the mic. "Tonight," he said, "a girl from nowhere just reminded all of us where greatness comes from." The school didn't look different when Lily returned the next morning. The bricks were still the same chipped red. The flag still flapped softly in the early morning breeze. The announcements still crackled over the loudspeakers with their usual static. But something beneath the surface had shifted. Like the tension in a room when someone finally tells the truth, and silence dares not return to what it was before. She stepped off the bus, backpack slung over her shoulder, head bowed against the cold wind. But she didn't make it 3 steps before she realized the hallway had gone quiet. Conversations hushed, lockers stilled. Students turned toward her like sunflowers bending in slow reverence. Then came the clapping, first from a group near the vending machines, then from the staircase, then a row of students lining the main corridor. One by one, they stood, they clapped. Not the kind of applause meant to flatter, but the kind that meant we saw you. "We heard you. You matter." Lily froze. For a moment, she didn't know what to do with the sound. She had grown up learning to shrink beneath noise, to hide in quiet, but now the sound was lifting her. She looked down the hall and saw Ms. Dorset standing beside the art teacher, both misty-eyed, both smiling as if something long hoped for had finally bloomed in front of them. At the end of the corridor, she spotted Mr. Alvarez, leaning on his mop handle like a shepherd watching his lamb take its first step into the light. She gave a small wave, awkward, unsure, but the clapping only grew louder. And still, Principal Hargrove was nowhere to be seen. That afternoon, a special assembly was announced. "A moment of school-wide recognition," the email read, "for achievement in the arts." The auditorium filled quickly. Lily sat in the front row as instructed, heart calm but ready. She had faced 1,000 silences. This time, she would not be shaken by noise. Principal Hargrove finally appeared, stepping on stage with a stiff smile that cracked under the lights. He approached the podium like a man climbing a hill that no longer obeyed him. "We are gathered here today," he began, "to celebrate a member of our student body who has brought great honor to this institution. Her recent performance at the State Education Gala was, without a doubt, moving, and her journey here, a reminder of resilience and the power of the human spirit." He paused, as if tasting the words in his mouth and finding them bitter. "Miss Lily Monroe," he continued, "has reminded us all what determination can look like." Polite applause followed. Nothing like the ovation she'd received earlier. Lily stood as instructed and walked to the stage. He handed her a thin glass plaque, her name etched into the surface, along with the school's crest. She held it delicately, like something that might shatter, but not fragility. From the weight of what it meant, she leaned toward the microphone, scanning the room. There were faces she didn't know, faces she did. Faces that once laughed at her. Faces that now leaned forward, silent, waiting. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said, her voice steady, every syllable ringing like a bell. When I first asked to play piano for this school's showcase, I was told I didn't belong. A shift moved through the crowd, a collective breath held. I was told I wasn't serious, that this stage wasn't for people like me. She glanced sideways. Hargrove's face tightened, his hands clasped behind his back. But someone heard me anyway, she continued. Someone listened, not because I had a name or connections, but because he believed in music that tells the truth. She looked out into the seats. That's what this has always been about. Not talent, not trophies, but truth. She paused. The auditorium was still. So to anyone sitting here who's ever been told to stay quiet, don't. Your voice matters, even if it's only you who hears it at first. She turned from the mic and walked down the stairs. Half the school stood before she reached the bottom. Mr. Alvarez waited by the exit, his eyes glassy. You spoke with fire, Pequeña, he said. She smiled. You lit it first. That evening the story broke. A local news outlet published an op-ed titled, "Why Didn't the School Support Lily Monroe?" The author, a parent and former alum, questioned why it took an external performance for the school to recognize what was always right in front of them. The article went viral. Comments poured in. Teachers from other schools chimed in. So did students, some who shared similar experiences, others who wrote simply, "She made us feel brave." By morning, district officials requested a formal inquiry into the school's handling of extracurricular admissions. A meeting was scheduled, and Hargrove? He wasn't hiding anymore, but his smile had cracked in public. During the faculty briefing the following day, he dismissed the controversy as media distortion. But the staff didn't look at him the same way. Not after hearing Lily speak, not after reading the article, not after realizing the silence they'd all lived with had finally been broken by a girl with a melody no one could ignore. Lily stayed quiet during the storm. She didn't need to fight with accusations. She let the music and the truth do what it always had. But inside she carried something brighter now. Not anger, not vengeance, peace. The kind you earn only when you've walked through fire barefoot and come out with a song in your throat. The janitor's closet became her second home once again. She and Mr. Alvarez worked on the next piece, something more joyful, playful even. A waltz with a heartbeat. He told her it reminded him of when he first met his wife. "You're not just a pianist now," he said one afternoon. "You're a composer." She laughed. "I never thought I'd be called that." He winked. "Then believe it." She did. And when she sat at the upright piano that night, the room lit only by the soft glow of a nearby lamp, she the audience, or the headlines, or even for justice. She played for herself. Because she had earned that right. Because she had taken every broken thing and turned it into something whole. The air in the school board meeting was heavy, with the kind of silence that dared not be broken casually. It clung to the walls of the municipal building like old dust, settling over every polished shoe and every manila folder stacked neatly in front of the officials. Lily sat in the third row with her hands folded in her lap, eyes lowered but ears open. Beside her sat Miss Dorset, spine straight, chin proud. Mr. Alvarez stood in the back, silent as always, but his presence rooted her like a tree grown quietly beneath the surface for years. On the opposite side of the room sat Principal Hargrove, flanked by 2 district representatives and a lawyer in a gray suit who kept whispering strategy in his ear. Lily didn't watch them. She didn't have to. The meeting had been called not just in response to a student's viral story, but to a pattern. Years of overlooked complaints, favoritism, and gatekeeping that had never quite made it into formal documentation, but that every teacher, every parent, every student had felt in quiet, individual ways. Now those quiet things had joined hands. Now they were a chorus. A woman from the board cleared her throat and adjusted her glasses. "We're not here to determine artistic merit," she said. "We're here to examine whether school leadership, knowingly or not, created a culture of exclusion." Hargrove shifted in his seat. The first to speak wasn't Lily, it was Ava Reynolds. No one had expected that. She stepped forward in ballet flats and a school sweatshirt, face clean of makeup, her voice calm but clear. She spoke not as the school's star student, but as a witness. "I saw how the system worked," she said. "I was a part of it. I benefited from it. But I also saw how it silenced others. When Lily tried to audition, she wasn't given a fair chance. That wasn't about policy. That was about power. She stepped down and walked straight past Hargrove without looking at him. Next came a younger teacher from the history department. Then two parents. Then Miss Dorset, whose voice broke when she said she didn't ask for recognition, she just asked for a chance to be heard. And instead of giving her that, we handed her a locked door. By the time Lily was called, the room was no longer quiet. It was listening. She stood slowly and approached the podium. "I'm not here to punish anyone," she said. "I'm not here to humiliate. I know what that feels like." She glanced around, finding Mr. Alvarez's steady gaze. "I've been invisible most of my life. In foster homes, in classrooms, in hallways. Music was the first thing that ever made me feel real. And when I tried to share that, I was told no. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I didn't fit." She paused. "I don't want to change that just for me. I want to change it for every student who's sitting quietly right now wondering if they'll ever be seen, if they'll ever get their moment." The board chair cleared her throat and leaned forward. "Lily," she said gently, "would you play something for us?" Lily blinked. "Now?" "If you're willing," the woman said. "I think we'd all like to hear the truth in your language." The room murmured softly as the maintenance staff rolled in a small, upright piano from the side hallway. It wasn't perfectly tuned. The lighting wasn't designed for performance. But none of that mattered. She sat, smoothed the front of her blouse, and placed her fingers on the keys. This time she played a simpler piece, one she had composed just the night before, a quiet echo of everything that had led to this moment. The melody rose gently like smoke in a room after fire, not sorrowful, but not triumphant either. Honest. The final note hung in the air for a long, breathless moment. When she looked up, even the attorney beside Hargrove had his eyes lowered. The board took 2 more hours to deliberate. Lily waited in the courtyard with Mr. Alvarez, watching a maple tree shed its last golden leaves into the wind. "What do you think they'll do?" she asked. He rubbed his chin, eyes on the breeze. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether they heard you," he said. "Really heard you." When the decision came, it was swift and unanimous. Principal Hargrove would be stepping down at the end of the semester. The announcement was made in a faculty-wide email, followed by a letter to students and parents. The tone was carefully worded. Leadership transition, strategic restructuring. But everyone knew the truth. He wasn't asked to leave because of one mistake. He was asked to leave because the music had revealed what silence had long tried to hide. For a day, the school buzzed like a hive broken open. There were opinions, jokes, even a few tense confrontations. But beneath it all was a new kind of energy. Change. Lily sat on the back steps of the auditorium that evening, watching the sky turn from pale amber to soft gray. She held the same plaque Hargrove had given her weeks ago, its surface catching the fading light. It didn't feel like a prize anymore. It felt like a turning point. "You've changed this place," Ms. Dorset said as she sat down beside her. "I didn't mean to." "Exactly why you did." They sat in silence for a while. Then Miss Dorset added, "They're renaming the music room. It'll be the Monroe Studio." Lily's breath caught. "What?" "It's official," she said, smiling. "The board voted yesterday, and they want you to perform at the dedication ceremony." Lily looked down at the grass. "I don't know if I deserve all this." "You don't get to decide that anymore," Miss Dorset said gently. "The world already has." Behind them, the school lights flickered on one by one, casting soft halos through the windows. Somewhere inside, a piano waited. The plaque gleamed under the soft golden lights, its letters etched deep into the wood, as if permanence had finally learned her name. The Monroe Studio. Dedicated to the power of unseen voices and the music they carry. Lily stood just inside the doorway of the newly renovated room, her fingers tracing the edges of the lettering. The once forgotten practice space had been transformed, repainted in warm earth tones, with soundproofed walls and a polished baby grand sitting at the center like a heart finally beating in the open. Dozens of chairs had been arranged in rows, but they weren't the hard metal kind the school usually used. These were cushioned, comfortable, welcoming. People began to arrive in quiet clusters. Students with hopeful eyes, teachers with softened expressions, a few members of the board who offered small nods of respect as they entered. Even a handful of Lily's former foster families were there, seated in the back like pages from different chapters, gathered in one binding at last. She saw Ava, too, seated near the front, arms crossed loosely but her eyes locked forward. A few seats over sat Miss Dorset, smiling in that steady way of hers that made Lily feel like everything painful had somehow been worth it. Mr. Alvarez stood near the wall, his usual mop nowhere in sight. Instead, he wore a freshly ironed button-up shirt, his shoulders a little straighter, his hands folded like a conductor waiting to raise the baton. A local newspaper crew had been allowed to cover the event. A photographer crouched near the piano, careful not to block the view. But Lily barely noticed the lenses. Her focus was somewhere else entirely. Because tonight wasn't about them. It wasn't even about her. It was about the kids who sat in the second row with wide eyes and tattered notebooks. The quiet ones. The overlooked. The children who hummed to themselves because no one had ever asked what song they knew by heart. It was for them. A hush settled over the room as the final guests took their seats. Miss Dorset stood and cleared her throat. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, her voice catching for just a moment before smoothing out like a bow across strings. This room was once empty, dim, almost forgotten, but one student filled it with something we hadn't heard in far too long: truth. Not just notes, not just rhythm. Truth. She turned slightly, gesturing to the girl standing at the edge of the spotlight. "Tonight, that student opens this room the way she opened our hearts." Lily took a step forward. Applause rose like a gentle tide, not thunderous, not overwhelming, but warm, sincere. She nodded once and then walked quietly to the piano. She sat, settled her feet on the pedals, let her hands rest just above the keys. Then she closed her eyes and began. The piece she played had no name. It didn't need one. It was built from fragments, notes whispered from broken keys, melodies that had once lived only in silence. She wove in the unfinished song Mr. Alvarez had given her, now whole and blooming with new life. She let it move through sorrow, into hope, through struggle, into peace. And then, without warning, she shifted. The final movement began as a single, echoing note, soft as breath. Then a lullaby. Her mother's lullaby. Not perfect, not clean, but real. The room was still. Even the cameras lowered their lenses, as if trying not to disturb something sacred. She ended with a chord that wasn't grand, but grounded. Final, but open. A doorway left ajar. When she lifted her hands, no one clapped. Not yet. They sat in silence for one perfect, breathless moment. Then came the sound, applause. Yes, but not the kind that demands acknowledgement. This was applause that thanked her, that whispered, "You gave us something we didn't know we needed." She stood, bowed her head, and stepped away from the piano. Mr. Alvarez was waiting. He held something in his hands, a small box wrapped in cloth. When she reached him, he passed it to her without a word. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a tuning fork, silver, simple, clean. "It was my father's," he said quietly. "He gave it to me when I started teaching. I was waiting for the right student to pass it on to. I think I found her." She looked at him, her eyes stinging. "I don't know what to say." "You already did," he said with a smile. "Every time you played." People began to gather around them, students asking about lessons, teachers sharing stories of their own first piano, board members shaking her hand and thanking her for changing something they hadn't realized was broken. But she didn't need any more praise. She had the music. Later that night, long after the crowd had gone, Lily returned to the studio one last time. The lights were dimmed now, the air cooler, but the piano still waited. She sat down again, not to perform, just to play. Softly, she moved through a new melody, one that hadn't existed until that moment. It came without thinking, without planning, a thank you, a prayer, a promise. And as the final note drifted into the quiet room, she smiled. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't just a girl who had once been forgotten. She was a pianist, a composer, a voice, a legacy. There will always be people who look at your silence and mistake it for weakness. There will always be doors that are locked, not because you lack the key, but because someone decided you weren't meant to enter. But Lily Monroe's story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that refuses to stay quiet any longer. She didn't fight with anger. She didn't shout to be seen. She sat at a piano and told the truth with her hands. And in doing so, she transformed not only her future, but the heart of an entire institution. This story is a tribute to every quiet soul with a gift the world hasn't noticed yet. To the foster children, the overlooked students, the underestimated talents. You are not defined by where you come from. You are not limited by who believes in you. Sometimes it only takes one moment of courage to become the melody that changes everything. So play your song, speak your truth, break the silence, because you never know who's listening and who might finally hear themselves in your music.